So how does that work? You look at like a number of mutations per million years or something like that in the genome?
Yeah, you're looking at, you can estimate a mutation rate for different groups. One of the issues with molecular clocks is you have to do it kind of on a per group basis. So for instance, the octocorals that I work on, actually the gene we use as our DNA barcode is a DNA repair gene in the mitochondrion. And so they have a much slower rate of mitochondrial evolution than most other vertebrate or invertebrate taxa, which means that we can't use the mitochondrial genome the same way you could for, say, difference between fishes. So you have to calibrate your clock, so to speak. But yeah, if you know the ages of different lineages, you can kind of estimate when they split.
Yes, please.
I was centering it up. Roger, yes, perfect.
This is a little black coral, Sauropathes.
Yeah, we haven't seen a lot of black corals.
No, this is one of the first ones we've seen this dive. This is a species that was collected, one of these red-colored individuals, just a couple dives ago.
It's got a little squat lobster on it.
Yep, little squat lobster associates.
And then what is the kind of coral? Is that an anemone or a cup?
That is a cup coral. Oh. That's probably a Javania.
Okay, come wide.
Although with cup corals, you really have to like sample them and count the number of different fin rays between the tissue to determine species. But based on that shape, I would guess Javania.
You want to back away from the wall?
Mm-hmm.
There's another little coral pom-pom. So it's right and below the lasers. Left, sorry.
Yeah. Little floof in the distance.
Chris, you want to center up on road nav again, please?
Bridge nav 20195.
Looks like you have an overhang. Or some big boulders that look...
Yeah. Dramatic changes in lithology as you go up that cliff.
Yeah.
Very pillow-like structure.
Yeah, this looks like some post-erosional volcanism or something. Where you just got a small little pillow cone coming through this other kind of sedimentary cap with a little chrysogorgid right in the middle.
Two of them. I like this type of chrysogorgid. Looks like a little squirrel tail to me.
Yeah, it does.
Nice flying, Kylie.
Thanks. Another squirrel tail?
Yep.
We did see a squirrel something on one of the watches. It's like, I don't know.
Gummy squirrel?
What, a Gumby squirrel?
Gummy squirrel.
Gummy squirrel, yes. Yeah, I would love to see the highlight of that.
It's a sea cucumber with a kind of a big fin on the back.
I don't know what it was.
If it's a gummy squirrel, then it's a sea cucumber. It's one of the ones that Liz is looking for.
It looked like You know how the sea dandelions sort of have, I don't know, valves?
Mhm.
It looked like that, but in the shape, like larger and in the shape of a squirrel's tail.
Ooh. I don't know what that is.
So yeah, it didn't look sea cucumberish in compared to usually what I'm used to seeing for a sea cucumber, but it doesn't mean it isn't.
Some dramatic landscapes here. Smooth, kind of lava crusted over, I'm guessing. And then, boom, super steep cliff.
Bridge nav 20215.
A little bamboo coral down there.
Oh yeah.
I don't,
Do you want me to go around it or up over it?
up would be great. Yeah, up and over. Yes, I don't think there's any scope for going around.
So here's a question in the chat about fossils. Would we expect to find a larger abundance of fossils at the seafloor or more at shallower depths, like the cliffs area we're seeing right now?
On the seamount, I wouldn't expect fossils really either, depending on how you define fossils. The marine snow is technically little fossils, but if you were talking about like macro fossils, like the one we're holding in our hand, I don't know if it's any difference where you'll find them, because those are coming from basically the pelagic zone and falling. So the key for fossils is having an anoxic zone that can be buried quickly, and we don't really have any of those around this seamount that I'm aware of, or that I've noticed. So I think
So you're giving me a good
all along the seamount's a bad place for preserving
So
fossils.
if you want, you can start to come out a little bit away from the cliff, and then it'll straighten itself out. And then I think the next move brings you a bit more into the wall.
That's a good question. But the geotop, if it's made up of limestone, is basically a series of fossils stacked on top of each other.
But we're not going to find like a T-Rex or anything out here.
No, unless it was able to swim with them little doggy paddle arms.
So the rock formations we're seeing here, you still believe are limestone, or?
I think we're seeing a mix of things. Yeah, I think there is some limestone and some just conglomerate-like debris from the erosion of the island, some of those layers, but then every now and then we'll see some kind of overlying kind of volcanic structures like pillow basalts, so it might have been some post-erosional volcanism. I haven't seen anything that's like really definitively limestone though, so it may not be very much limestone in this area, or if any. Problem is, a lot of this is hard to tell when everything is just completely covered in ferromanganese.
Like usually there's a more gentle wall. We would just drop down a wee bit and then it'd like require it, but there's no
Yeah.
there is no down.
There's
There's only far away down.
Yeah.
So we just have to wait for Chris to push us in a bit.
No worries.
But if you want, you can look off to the right. It'll be a bit behind the ship move, but while we're waiting, if you want. So I think that's a little closer.
Chris has her map coming out.
You know, it's mapping. There's a big, turns out there's a big ridge here.
What?
I know, crazy, right?
It's actually quite a nice map of the ridge. You can see the structures and how steep it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's up on channel 3.
Let me make sure. I think we're running out of range on the Norbit.
If we had a dive plan that was specific for a cliff, could we turn Norbit perpendicular to get a better map, or?
We can. Here, I can, if you have it up, I can show you real quick. So we can do, well, we're not actually up against a cliff now, but we can adjust the swath like so.
Oh, cool.
And do surveys along the side. We can, yeah, you can only see up maybe 10 degrees or something because of the light bar.
Yeah.
Norbit, I think Norbit can go up a little higher than that, but and if we really want to map a cliff, we can mount it forward facing and sideways.
Hey, Chris.
And then like pan along the side, like we're kind of like we're doing now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But the problem is the nav is hard because you don't have DVL lock and stuff, so it's pretty hard to get a nice constant trajectory.
Right.
That's, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You're going to, Raj.
Yeah, but the ability to...
Okay.
The ability to steer the Norbit is nice when you can't get down there and actually physically remount it, so.
Yeah, that is very cool.
What can't this thing do?
Sample rock.
Good, if you really hit it hard enough.
Just use it like a rhino horn and scoop it up.
Yeah,
Challenge accepted.
we practically have a horn right now.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting problem to come up with like a, I mean, we could work something out to like map a cliff, but in order to like do these surveys reliably,
Yeah.
it would be really, that could actually be a super interesting research project, like.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, hey. Yeah, Chris, can we get a little bit more of a dramatic move into the slope there?
yeah, I just did one.
Okay.
So I don't know if we want to, I'll do another shallow move towards, at least until we see the one that we just did.
Okay, sounds good.
We could do another 240. Yeah. All right. Ridge nav 20240.
Thanks, Chris.
That's probably as many as we want to do until we
Settle.
start to feel it. Yeah. Yeah.
Dun dun.
Like when they teach you to drive on the highway and they tell you always leave yourself a way out. No, nobody else have that advice.
Nope.
Nope. You don't do much moseying in New York City.
Yeah, if you want to look at where we're at right now, I suppose. Yeah. Kind of, yeah. We had to just wait for the swing. Unless we want to drop really far in the water column.
Really, how do you feel about that idea? Yeah. No, it's okay.
Okay. Starting to move. All right.
Okay.
How about I get you just to position up here, okay? And then whenever it comes into position.
Sure.
It's emerging from the darkness. So Jess and Kylie, do ROV teams often swap operators? Then
Yeah, actually, I think, well, for here, we try to, make sure everyone gets stick time and trained up on certain things or manip times, things like that. With other groups, one person's always nipping and one person's flying. So sometimes here you see folks do, well, it makes sense if there's like a really, really novice Argus pilot. But usually it's good to split up the roles of manip and flying.
Bridge nav 1517 or 270.
Yeah. So whenever I'm flying, Kylie's gonna do the manip, and unless it's something that's like a big, what's the word? A not good situation. And vice versa.
Being able to do both simultaneously lets us do a lot more like precarious sort of like we not able to perch places. Is you can just actively fly and grab at the same time.
right, because the normal, otherwise the operating procedure would be to kind of park it and.
Yeah, they can go in their autos and do it. But maybe if like everything's moving kind of fast, they want to just get in, get out. I can back further away from the wall to get closer to where you want me. I just was trying to say something.
Yeah, no, you're good. Yeah, I think we just need to feel that move. I think you're good.
Raj.
So now we're, 40 meters.
Yeah. Raj.
Here's a question in the chat about Norbit. Can Norbit only look directly down from the vehicle in a thin slice, or can it be adjusted to be more forward-looking?
So it can only look in one direction. We have a couple ways we can mount it. Sometimes we mount it forward looking and sometimes we mount it downward looking. We have mounted it on a motor that can move it up and down, so we can change those locations on the fly, but the motor is out of commission right now, so we're down to a rigid mount. Some versions of the Norbit and other multi-beams can do what's called beam steering, and acoustically it can steer the beam around. So it can look forward and back, you know, maybe 20 degrees. Which is also cool, because then you can do like a little like a sweep and kind of get, instead of just a line of points, you can get sort of an area of points. But our Norbit does not do that.
We just have to wait for that. We just have to wait for the swing, because you're 65 off the ground there, so either we drop 65 meters in the water column, or we just wait for that swing to be felt. And the swing's already dialed in, so we just have to come back up as soon as we go back down, you know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, I think so the wall is like 30 meters off of you there. So.
All right, Argus is finally swinging in here, Atalanta. The Clumpus.
Go ahead, drive ahead if you want, but I don't think we'll see much anymore. Yeah. Sorry, Becco. We'll get back to the wall soon.
No problem.
Reach nav, 10 meters, 270.
For those watching at home, we are not ascending. We actually just got pulled away from the wall a bit, and we're going back towards it.
It doesn't. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the problem is you can't detect what the cliff is doing until you get up on it, and your motions with the ship are 10 minutes late. So you end up, if you don't know what to expect on the cliff, you kind of...
But we know what to expect on the cliff.
Well, not really. We were, on the map, we were going down. I was following contours initially, but then the cliff was like not doing that. So you can see this is the cliff here, and it jumped down like 2 or 3 contours. So I kept pulling back, and all of a sudden the cliff shot over again.
Yeah.
And now is back in line with the contours, but...
Is there a reason HYPACK uses such coarse resolution? You can't put like a 10-meter bathymetry map on it?
You could, but we don't have 10-meter data.
Oh, that's not the multi-beam we swatched weren't that precise?
No. No, most of the multi-beam maps at this depth are 50 meters at best.
Ah, interesting.
Really?
Wow. Yeah.
So just let you know, Kylie, my heading's off by 90 because it got swung around. So
yeah, Raj.
When you look at the sonar.
Do you want me to come closer to you?
Yeah, if you don't mind lateraling a bit to the left there.
To the left or to the right?
Reach nav, 15 meters, 270.
To the left. And then Just we're still waiting anyway,
Raj.
and then we can get that straightened out while we wait. See if we make any headway. Nice.
Oh, I see in the Norbit map what you're talking about, Chris. It kind of took a sort of a right turn.
Yeah.
The clip
Right.
did.
Yeah, right about there is what. So yeah, there's this part that like jutted out, and then suddenly it went shot over. And this is, the cliff went like that. It turned, and we kept going this way.
Right.
So.
What are those little white dots that are flowing by us? Is that just marine snow that was getting blown out the thrusters, or?
Okay.
I think it's mud and things from the bottom of the vehicle that are just getting released as we move around in the water column. From landing to pick up those rocks.
I come
I
up
see,
right
I
here.
see.
Screw it.
Here's another question in the chat about Norbit. So why do you not have Norbit on Atlanta? It seems like it would be a perfect, since it's always above Herc and it would get a wider view of the area. Is it because the vehicle would be constantly in the way?
Yeah,
or,
so
okay.
so there's a couple problems with doing it on Atalanta, and one, you've seen how much heave we have in Atalanta. You can see that in the video, which that's not great. You could probably deal with that in post-processing, but one of the main problems is the navigation on Atalanta is not as good. It doesn't have DVLs, so we can't. That's our acoustic velocity sensor. And without a DVL, our positioning is much less precise than it is on Herc. And also, its heading sensor is it's a magnetometer, so it's based on the Earth's magnetic field, whereas Herc's is a high precision fiber gyro, which gives you absolute heading and is much more precise. So it's mostly comes down to it just doesn't have the navigational equipment that Hercules does. Yeah, but I agree, like having it on Atalanta could be pretty cool, because you could basically just drag it along and make a constant, keep at a constant heading and make a map as you go. But there's some other factors that make it tough to do that. Say again? We had one, I had a couple 270s in, and I keep doing it, and you know, yeah. Yeah, the cliff is like really gone in now, so I don't, well, I'll do another 270. I'm just gonna keep them in because it looks like that'll bring us sort of along the strike and closer. So, yeah, sure.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Bridge nav 20270.
If you want, I can come down a little bit, Kylie, and I think you can probably acquire the wall.
There's a clade bamboo coral sticking up in the distance, I think. Maybe.
Oh yeah, I see it now. Over to the right of the lasers.
Yeah. Little Campbell.
Suddenly seeing a lot of those. We didn't see any of them earlier in the dive and suddenly appeared.
I'm going to go out auto heading and I'll just stretch out behind you.
I can smell the cookies from downstairs.
Nice.
Thank you for saying that. That's when my stomach started growling a little while ago. And it didn't like register in my brain, but
I just realized, I'm like, oh, that's like the waft of vanilla. Where'd that come from?
So there's a little shelf on top of a very large cliff. Can we have a zoom on this little coral, if possible?
Sure.
I think that's a coral.
I'm thinking it's a shadow.
Yeah, it might be a shadow.
Yeah, I don't, sorry. I lost
Shadow
my
coral.
heading there.
Yeah, I think it's just,
Rock.
yeah, rock.
So that's an interesting formation, Kevin, where you get that boulder there that looks like it's a bunch of in the middle of the screen with around sitting in a bunch of gravel, but then there looks like lava coming over it.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're kind of seeing that over here. You get layers of these kind of conglomerate, these rounded boulders and cobbles. And then sometimes it looks like there's lava flows in place on top of them. That looks like a thin little flow. Earlier we saw some large pillow basalts.
It looks less than in the still cam.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a big old actual structure that's coming off.
Bridge nav 20270. 270.
All right.
Onya, any last questions from the internet before we turn over the watch?
Yeah, one viewer is wondering if Norbit will always be on Herc.
No, it won't. Because it's kind of in a vulnerable position up where it is. We tend to not put it on the vehicle unless we have a specific need for it. It will always, it's always available to put on Herc, but it won't be on every dive.
Can you build a little protective cage around them?
Yeah, so I was actually talking with Josh about that, and there's going to be a redesign of some of the frame over the winter, and they're going to look for a permanent spot to mount in orbit, a more permanent spot, so maybe we'll get something better like that. It's also co-owned with my lab in Rhode Island, with
Right.
Chris Roman's lab. So in the off season, it's also out there, and we do some surface survey work with that as well.
Yeah, we have some Norbit fans in the chat who don't want Norbit to go away.
Don't leave Norbit.
Well, that's been one of my goals out here, is to make the Norbit and the associated mapping and navigation system more usable, just basically to make an interface and for other navigators and things to use. So you basically don't need to be an expert in Norbit to run Norbit anymore. So hopefully in the future, because of that, we'll be seeing some more Norbit use.
Just went over a nice little coral.
We'll get everything positioned just for next watch, it seems.
Yep.
Thanks for the watch, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good job, both of you, on that vertical sheer wall we're looking down over.
Good morning, good evening, and good night, depending on where you are in the world. We are now on the 48 watch in the PM, with back at it with Delta Dan of the Ventic Storms. If you have any questions, please go on pop over to our website at nautiluslive.org, and we'll do our best to answer them.
Have you noticed, Matt, that sometimes you say good morning, good evening, and good night, and sometimes you say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening?
Well, it depends on how I'm feeling today. So, the PM sometimes a little lower energy, and my brain doesn't work as well.
Matt, did you get clued into what we're looking at there?
That's another beaked whalebone, isn't it?
It sure is.
We're not
collecting
special.
this one?
We have the permit for it.
Well,
Hey!
After all.
Hold on, let's get some terminology right here. It's a fossil, it's not a bone, as far as we know. So
sorry.
it's a rock. So let's just be clear about that. And it's, yeah, definitely within our permits. Yeah.
Answering the question in chat, how much longer is the dive? Not much longer. We are just starting to wrap up. I believe we're going to come up in maybe a few hours, probably during our watch. But stay tuned, and then you can see how we pull our ROVs up. Good night. Oh, look, Benthic Boy's still here. Did you see the shark from earlier? Yes, we did. It was really cool. It's a cat shark, I think.
I didn't see it.
You didn't see it?
No.
Man, it was cool.
I didn't see it either.
I didn't see it either, but I heard it was
I'll be
cool.
looking for that in the highlights.
Yeah, it will be in our highlight reel, posted maybe a solid
Eventually.
week after this, maybe a week, a month, something like that.
It's a big difference.
All right, Steve, I'm zoomed out in HiPAC so we can get an idea of where we are in the world
Yeah.
and where we want to go.
Yep. So I think we've
Test 1, 2.
we haven't been seeing
Gotcha,
much
good.
down here, so I think we're
got
gonna head upslope a bit. So I think.
Yep.
Can you draw a line from here, like 250?
Sure can.
Show me where that ends up.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, let's do that. So maybe, direct due south of waypoint 9, you can put like a 9.1.
Sure.
Or 10 or whatever.
Okay.
And we'll make a track towards that.
Okay.
And to answer that question in the chat, how long has that arm been hanging up there? It's been up there for about 2, maybe 3 hours. Just holding on to our little fossil.
Has it really?
Yeah,
All right.
it's been hanging on for a while.
All right.
Good here.
Okay, we got no wraps in the 6A, the tether, so let's keep it that way. Get rid of this.
Hopefully somebody does some cool work with the fossil.
Yeah, I think we were just talking about that. And we have some colleagues that have done some work on traces of these animals from nearby waters. So the interesting thing is that, to the best of my knowledge, from some literature I've been looking through today, these animals have had presence in the seamount environment, but it hasn't been well documented, particularly out in this part of the ocean in the Central Pacific. And I think their presence on mostly guyots we've been diving on is noteworthy. perhaps because there's something favorable about these sites that remains or suggests that they linger here for some period of time. Otherwise, you would imagine if it was just due to chance, where you would end up with whale fall in a guyot environment. You'd suspect they would probably be a bit more scattered. So there might be something important about the presence of these traces in this type of environment. So I think it's worth examining the material we have to see if these are potentially, if there's any material here, first of all, that would suggest that these animals are unidentified or maybe present historic, potentially extinct species. But it's tough to tell because as with fossils, this one is substantially degraded. It's not complete. So it's something that we'll have to discuss with some specialists. But there's enough data out here to potentially scour some video records, archives, to see if this is a more widespread thing. I noticed we saw actually some in previous years, but for the most part, throughout, I believe most of Oceanus Explorer Expedition 1706, which was out here in 2017, I don't recall seeing any, and they dove on a number of these guyots, including this one. So it would be worth reviewing that data again to see if there was something we missed. Because these are not living things. They don't really, they wouldn't really show up on a video analysis of living fauna, for example, corals and sponges. So they'd be fairly easy to miss and possibly easy to confuse with something like a woodfall.
A woodfall?
Yeah.
Is that when wood sinks to the bottom of the ocean?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, woodfalls are
Bless you.
really important, unique environments in the deep sea. They have a wholly unique set of animals that are associated with them, like wood-boring mollusks, and certain gastropods and echinoderms like sea stars or urchins are often, certain species are exclusively found on woodfalls. But similarly, you can also have, like we saw a couple years ago, whale falls, for example. When whales die, decompose, fall to the seafloor, they leave down deposits of bone, which are usually filled with lots of nutritious material for invertebrates to take advantage of. And so we often find invertebrate communities breaking down the material at these sites. Most notably, things like Osidax worms are responsible for degradation of these sites, as well as various different kinds of echinoderms or maybe mollusks, like octopods and things.
And then answering that question in the chat, are you going to post some of these photos of the fossil skull in a blog update? I hope so. I believe Megan is currently actually right now on that. So if you look on her blog in the next maybe 2 to 3 hours, it should be updated, hopefully. Question for Brandon. Is the steep cliff part of the plate or caused by volcanic activity?
Caused by volcanic activity, most likely. There can be some variation in like the elevation of the plate when it forms at the mid-ocean ridge, but we think this is volcanics. especially because mid-ocean ridges don't form islands. The volcanism doesn't get to the surface, so, and this was most likely an island at one time or another.
Cool. Another question from Benthic Boy. Do you know what kind of species of these beak whales these bones are from? We do not at the moment, but we are going to, Steve, you can also correct me if I'm wrong, but we're going to send our fossils over to our onshore labs and they will discover what kind of creature it is, or what kind of species of beak whale?
Yeah, we'll have to do some groundwork first to find out what kinds of setups. Well, first of all, what we have. That's something we can establish in the lab if we have, if it's straight rock or if there's something more diagnostic there. So we can take a look at that on the ship and then make a plan for how these things can be identified. To the best of my knowledge, these animals don't necessarily have to represent existing species. They could be extinct species. So potentially we could be talking millions of years, and over millions of years, the species might change that are found in this area. There might be morphological differences. In any sort of anatomy that's left over. So that it's something we will take into account, whether like a modern mammal specialist or a marine paleontologist might be the best person to consult about these types of things.
Do we have one working with the Ocean Trust Exploration, OT,
OET?
OET, yes.
OET.
The Ocean Exploration Trust, do we have one of those people working for us?
Not as far as I know. So we have a registration of scientists ashore who are interested in various different cruises over the course of a season. And on this expedition, we have something like 40 odd scientists from all over the world of different specialties who have expressed interest, and that's usually our first go-tos, but oftentimes definitely have to look more broadly as deep sea biology, ecology, taxonomy is a very interdisciplinary they're interdisciplinary fields, and they often require very highly specialized expertise. So that in that case, additional resources might be required. But I'll stress it's very early days. we just made an observation. We don't know really all that much yet. So try not to be too much of a downer, but also try not to hype it up too much.
And then another question from Benthic Boy. How fast are the whales eaten when they die?
Years, most likely. And it often depends on the oceanography of the area and what species are present. I'm pretty sure there's some great resources online about that you could find more qualified information for. I'm sure Nautilus Live might even have a blog. It was an extensive 2 years of work done, two exploration cruises that visited that site off of Davidson Seamount back in 2019 and 20. The before times.
Why 4 times?
Before the pandemic.
Well, yeah.
Just casually forgot about that.
Yeah, well, it's so long ago. Oh, no, I mean, it affected all of us, but I try to suppress those memories,
Yeah, we had a very productive, very successful dive there in 2020 at Davidson Seamount with a limited science party. I had the fortune of being out there as a science manager. And it was, really fantastic how much we were able to do when
a lot of the
shows up then.
country was either locked down or not able to go to sea in some instances.
So back then, what was the kind of COVID protocol?
I don't recall all the details, but quarantine usually before coming to sea, and often that is still in effect for some ships you might find all around the world. Few days quarantine prior, of course testing, and then usually masks, and creating a bubble of sorts so you can monitor who comes and goes from the ship, so you can reduce potential infection. But those are all standard practices for ocean-going research vessels these days. I've been on other ships, and those practices are similar across the board.
Yeah. And that's why
it's a very dangerous thing to be at sea, with the potential of serious disease like COVID. So we have to take lots of precautions. Because we're very far offshore and we don't have any potential emergencies.
What's the protocol if someone on the ship does get COVID?
Can we? Okay, we're ahead of there. Just seeing where we're going. No, I was just seeing where we were going. If we head kind of like more to the southwest, we can kind of go up at a less steep slope and kind of lateral along at the same time. Can we do that?
Sure. You want to do more like 230?
No, I meant more with like Herc going back and forth along the wall instead of driving straight up. We can keep this bearing. Huh. That's weird.
Speaking of weird,
someone
in the chat asks, is the lack of biodiversity in this area similar to other explored 1,600 meter depth regions? If so, what environmental differences could cause more sea life to thrive?
Can you repeat the question?
Is the lack of biodiversity in this area similar to other explored 1,600 meter depth ranges? If so, what environmental differences could cause more sea life to thrive?
I would actually push against that and say that, I don't think there's a lack of biodiversity here. I think that the deep sea is quite patchy, and even though we're not seeing anything with our eyes right here, that really ignores a lot of the other potential biodiversity that occurs in this area. You might not see a lot of megafauna everywhere you go, like corals and sponges, but I guarantee you in this patch of dead sponge here, there's probably dozens of species of small macroinvertebrates. So this is all sponge rubble here. So, I mean, megafauna-wise, it's very patchy, but, our goal heading to 9.1 is hopefully to get up and over the top of the lip of the crest of this seamount, probably see a little bit more out of the gully here. But, I think it's really easy to overlook a lot of the small biodiversity. There was a famous study done back in the late 60s using box cores off of the eastern seaboard of the U.S. From the New England out to Bermuda, and they found comparable levels of biodiversity in deep sea sediments that rivaled that of shallow water coral reef environments. So I think it all depends on what kind of microscope you use. What's your tool that you're using to quantify, to classify the biodiversity here. So whether it's similar or different, I think we're seeing quite similar species that we would see to other sites at similar depths. I was remarking downstairs that we are missing a couple of families that I thought we would see at this area, namely the plexaurids and perhaps acanthogorgids. They started to appear as deep as 2,000 meters at a site, I think yesterday's site.
And so I would expect to see them here, but for some reason they're absent or they're not right in this area. They don't like this habitat, which is a possibility. So certain, there may be certain habitat preferences that might not be filled for those particular taxa. Yeah, I mean, the last part of that question is what kinds of habitat characteristics might, change patterns of biodiversity. It depends on which scale you're considering. Are you talking about thousands of miles or thousands of, thousands of meters? In the larger scale, you could be talking about differences in deep sea water mass structure or geomorphology of certain seamounts that might provide you access to different species' preferred depth ranges. At the smaller scale, you could be talking about currents and locally induced flows, around certain topography, or just aspect, which side of the seamount you might be on, could make a difference. Looking here, I'm noticing that there's not a whole lot of stuff, so I'm guessing the flows are quite sluggish, at least compared to what we were seeing earlier this morning. And the slope here doesn't, even though it probably will be solid the second we try and touch down and poke a rock, it doesn't give the appearance of being all that solid. And if it isn't, there's a possibility that, unstable slopes could yield, loose rocks and things that long-lived corals would not, or prefer not to attach to, because they would fall down slope if they acquired any sort of mass. There's a couple of stalked crinoids here, and they do have some mass, but not as much as you might think, which suggests that maybe, the slope is fairly well consolidated. And based on what we were seeing earlier with the rock poking, I would suggest it probably is.
Then I'm going to really quickly answer that question in chat. Why don't show the depth of dive? We do show the depth of dive. If you go to our website, nautiluslive.org, and you just scroll up a little bit, or scroll down just a little bit, you can see Hercules' depth and Atlanta's depth, and the water temperature in both Celsius and degrees.
Steve, that was a fantastic answer in regard to the biodiversity. I think you're right. It really depends on the scale, and so many of us are, focused on the charismatic megafauna. So it was,
yeah, it's something.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. It's definitely something I think we overlook. Push cores might tell us something about the sediment, but at these sites it's very hard to get coreable material, and so the tools you have to employ to look at those animals in the sediments are, they might not even exist. Who knows?
Right.
In the DSC, there's a
fish.
I guess I'll cancel what I was about to say.
This is a Halosaur.
Sure thing.
And if we can focus on the head, we can differ between the two genera. I can tell from this far away based on the elongated face as well as the lack of scales right on top of the head. This is in the genus Algorandia. Algorandia and Halosaurus are the two predominant genera, but their main defining characteristic is that patchy scale patch on the head that is absent in Algorandia. So you can actually see right on top of the head parts of their what are basically brains through their skull.
Wow.
Basically brains?
Basically.
You know what? They're bigger than mine.
There's a specific name for it in fishes, and I've reached the end of my words for backbone things.
Then another question for the chat for Benthic Boy. What do the starfish eat down here?
Pretty much anything they want to, but most of the time they're probably going to eat coral, sponges, or other small macroinvertebrates like hydroids or potentially like foraminiferans or small, other small invertebrates, barnacles, things like that. But overwhelmingly corals and sponges. Yeah.
And interesting too about talking about the slopes we're on and whether it's consolidated or not is we were thinking about a possible failure in this area from the geo. You can kind of see on the bathymetry, it kind of looks like the slope just drops off like a failure would. Yeah, and that could contribute to maybe it being unconsolidated where it was consolidated before. But we would have to poke rocks to be sure.
What do we have open for box space? I'm just curious for samples. I know we have one Niskin left.
We have Omega open. It has a C pen, and I believe we can double up on boxes A through D with smaller rocks.
Cool, right. And one slurp, or two, yeah. Okay.
Another question from chat. So are Halosaurus
okay.
lizard fish? The other watch kept referring to them as such, but I thought they were completely different orders.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. Common names confuse me, because I know there are shallow water lizard fishes. So yeah.
Hang on. Oh. Lizard fish. Deep sea lizard fish. Huh. Well. I don't think a Halosaurus is a lizard fish because these are terrifying.
What was that?
Well, there's multiple
There's
species.
multiple species of deep sea lizard fish, and I'm not. Hang on.
It's not in the common animals.
Halosaurus. Yeah, Chibble.
There's really not much here. I've seen an occasional bamboo now and again, but I think we're really out of the flow. But I think immediately adjacent to us to the north, there's a bit of a shelf. So I'm guessing if we come up a little bit more in the next couple 100 meters or so, maybe 200 meters, we'll probably get into some faster current.
Just a little pillow sticking out, or pillows.
Yeah, I was surprised to see some of those a while back as well. There was some pretty big outcrops, some boulders, pillows, and what appeared to be one giant lava tube cracked up.
Is that right?
Yeah, maybe about an hour ago. A little bit over, no, an hour and a half ago now. So maybe there could be some secondary processes going on here.
Oh yeah, that looks trippy. Oh, another fish. Small one.
What type of fish would you say that is?
What's that?
What type of fish would you say that was?
Oh, shit. You're asking the wrong dude.
I didn't catch that fish either.
It was too far away anyway.
Yeah.
Well, Brandon, we'll ask you then in which case. What kind of rock is this?
You're asking the wrong dude. No. It's a good question.
A couple of Umbellula sea pen there.
There's some interesting topography here. I mean, I want to say it's just pillow basalt, but we are right next to the carbonate cap, so.
Can we take a zoom on the lower right corner here? There's something on the top of this rock.
The fact that it's oriented at a like 45-degree angle.
A bit further down here.
Does that give you some hints of what it is?
No, but it makes me confused.
Makes my brain hurt.
Like it makes me think of like a debris flow.
Yeah, Danny, there's something on top of a boulder right down here. Right down here.
So Brandon, here's another question. What classifies as a boulder? What classifies as a rock?
Well, every boulder is a rock, but not every rock is a boulder. It's actually grain size. I can look up the numbers for you.
Bamboo?
Yeah, it's a bamboo coral.
There are specific.
It's a very small colony.
There are specific diameters. You can probably look up like grain size chart, and on there there'll be what
your DSC is pretty close to the
what classifies as
nub
which.
here.
I took a picture, but I'll take another one.
Oh, that's the bone shadow we're seeing?
Cool. Okay, good on the coral. Thanks.
Got it. Okay. So let's see. Of course.
Oh, don't worry about it, person in chat. You're fine.
I think this is this bamboo coral is actually a smaller colony of one we collected earlier on in the dive.
So, do you think this bamboo coral is particularly healthy?
Thank you. Yeah, I do.
Really?
Yep. It has a small bare patch on one of the branches, but I don't see any obvious predation going on.
So according to this chart, about anything bigger than 25 centimeters.
It's a neat shot in the DSC.
Is
see the whole
boulder.
slope.
Oh.
And then it goes boulder, cobble, pebble, sand, silt, clay. Clay being the smallest.
So Steve, some people in the chat want to know about the fossil. Why is it the only thing that remains?
I was trying to wonder that too. I don't know. I really don't know. There's a chance that these might not be in place things, so there could be other fragments of the animal that had not fallen down slope or that had been dispersed, over millions of years if it is that old. So I think we'll have to take a better look at it and see what we have and what we don't have. But I would imagine smaller fragments, usually the skull and cranium are usually the largest fragments, single fragments. But it's also very unusual that most of these appear to be upper, possibly upper jawbones for the beaked whales. So I am not 100% certain why that would be the case, if there's something mineralogically different about them.
Some people are saying in chat that it's because the beak whales have incredibly dense skulls. Could that also be true?
That could be, if that is true, yep.
Just FYI, you're just dropping behind, I'm looking straight down. I'm not going to try and turn around.
It's going to be hard to focus on anything else, but I guess we can manage. I'd rather, if it's going to be risky and, damage it, I'd rather just, we can put it in front of the DSC. Yeah, let's just go with that. Yep.
In the bubble.
Well, yeah, the last watch was actually remarking that if we had an empty push core quiver, it would actually go great in there.
And then for the people in the chat asking
We
what they
could
just
do that.
saw, that is a piece of a beaked whale skull, we believe. And
Yeah.
we're going to carry it up and see if we can put it in our data lab and then put it up to our onshore scientists so we can discover more about it.
No, if this is safe, let's just keep it here. Yep.
We have another question from chat. Over great swaths of time, at this depth, are there currents that accelerate and decelerate and could move smaller / lighter fossils further away from their sunken position? Or would it just get buried in the sediment?
I mean, currents do change over time, but I wouldn't expect them to move debris very far. So I think the more likely option is it gets buried in sediment and it's never seen again until it becomes part of the mantle.
How many fossils would you think are part of the mantle?
Spooky.
It's kind of hard to fossilize stuff. Has to be correct conditions. It has to be correct material. But I mean, there are millions of organisms and it takes millions of years for it to subduct, so millions of fossils.
So where do you think fossils are more common, in the ocean or on land?
Land.
Really?
Yeah.
That would be my guess.
Why's that? 50-50 chance?
I mean, oceans are not great places for long-term preservation like we discussed this morning. The ocean's crust, the planet's skin is being constantly subducted and extruded through volcanism, so I would guess you would probably have potentially longer lived fossils on land that is perhaps not as continental crust is not as often subducted, right? It's mostly oceanic crust.
Yeah, it's oceanic. It's way more dense.
More dense. The basalt's more dense than the continental crust, which is largely granitic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So granitic, what does that mean for those of us that don't know?
So granite's felsic. It's a felsic volcanic rock. It's also intermediate, which is
I'm
andesitic.
just heave compensating.
Basically, it's just mixing of magma happens over time, and eventually
Got it.
granite comes out. That's a very simple way of putting it, but it just means it's a felsic material. It could be rhyolitic or granitic. It's just a difference of whether it crystallized under the surface or not.
And so that's a pretty common occurrence to happen then?
What's going on with these traces over here? Because I see the numbers 2 and 0. 2, 0. So I'm going to put that on my lottery numbers. 20.
How many more numbers do you have to go?
I don't know, but I can play as many cards as I want to when I get back home.
That's true.
Okay, I thought these were something else. I thought they were feeding traces, but they're actually just shadows of the rock, which is one of the more common misidentifications we make.
So did you ask if it was common?
Yeah, is it a fairly common occurrence?
Geologically, yes. In terms of geologic time.
But geologic time could be over millions of years.
Right.
Okay. So in terms of human time, not so common. In terms of geological time.
How often do we see volcanic eruptions? I mean, especially ones that, you know, create tons of crust.
Fish coming up. 12 o'clock.
But it's only 4:41. Is that another halosaur or? Lizard fish? We're going to put down fish. Here's a question for Brandon again. So is there any other environment on Earth where you can find fossils that's still insto on the ground?
Oh.
As opposed to actually being encased in a rock layer?
In situ? Oh, yeah.
In situ, yeah.
You can find fossilized bones everywhere. I mean, we found one when I was hiking, like a bighorn sheep. The bone was being fossilized. It was cool. But yeah, you can find them everywhere. It doesn't really matter. As long as it's low energy environments, so deserts or mud plains, then you can find fossils.
Then answer the question in the chat. How's the weather on the surface? We keep losing transmission. Well, it's a little bumpy out here. We are heading, I believe, towards a more rockier area, if you will. If you look on channel 3, you can see the our weather conditions, where it's mostly kind of a grayish sky. It's kind of dull looking, and we're getting a little tossed around, not as much as we were this morning, but it's not too bad.
There's not much around here. I've been seeing some small, very wispy chrysogorgia, but nothing really to speak of. Everything's pretty small. Hopefully another 100 meters or so, we should start to see larger things that are on the rim of the seamount here. It's pretty sharp. It's a pretty sharp crest.
Brandon, as a follow-up question, can you find those fossils where the animals actually died?
So, and otherwise being transported, or like within like layers of sediment? So they want it just like on the surface chilling there like the whale skull fossil is?
I guess. I think that's what they
Yeah, I
meant.
mean, I guess that's what in situ means.
That is.
What a beautiful slime star. Yeah.
Yeah, you
10,000 watch
You definitely
bucks,
can.
so you can remember the name of it.
This specific sea star, Patrick?
Patrick.
No.
Slime star.
Steve, no.
Thought I taught you all this.
It was 4 in the morning, Steve.
Oh, this was days ago.
Yeah, at 4 in the morning, Steve.
Not a good student at 4 in the morning.
I don't think anybody is.
Or 4 in
Is
the
that
afternoon.
its buckle mass at the top of its body?
So these stars are covered with like a thin sheet of tissue, but that's actually just an opening where they can exchange water, I believe. But it's not the typical madrepora you usually hear about. You can actually see it open and close. It's pretty neat. But yeah, they're a really complicated organism. Definitely most well suited for life in the deepest parts of the deep sea. We see them down several thousand meters sometimes, so 3,000–4,000 meters, not uncommon. But yeah, slime star, Pterasteridae, genus Hymenaster. Very nice.
Then
all right, let's keep going.
Answer the question, what kind of birds do you see flying around the ship? The birds that we usually see are boobies, as they've taken up roosting in the top. As actually you can see on channel 3, there's actually a few just sitting there on our forward, not clear on the boat terminology, but the forward stand. Mast. There we go. The forward mast, just kind of, that's where they sleep, that's where they kind of hang out for the rest of the ship.
And I think the Hawaiian name for those birds is according to Hoku.
Yeah, I think so.
And then we've also been seeing some koa'e. I forget the English name.
Let's call them that.
Yeah, it's like the white birds with like the 2 stringy mabobbers coming out of its tail.
We need.
Are those just the white-tailed tropic bird?
Yeah, that one. There's the red-tailed one and then the white-tailed one too. Yeah.
Hemicorallium, precious coral. Probably the most abundant thing we've seen on the dive today. Between this and chrysogorgid, it's a tight race.
Is that a sea serpent on it?
Yeah, brittle star. This is typically the colony size we've been seeing. They haven't been getting much bigger than this, although we've seen a couple of really large fans.
This is
the thing about this is
precious coral,
Hemicorallium, yeah. But with these animals, sometimes when they get large enough, certain branches, certain parts will break off and fall down slope, but they keep growing. They are brittle, but they will keep growing, and sometimes they have nice flobellate shapes, and sometimes they have these very mangled-looking shapes. They'll often lose the branches at the lower end of the colony first. But this one looks all intact. So.
And is that a crimson serpent star or a brittle star? Or?
Yeah, it's a type of brittle star, a serpent star. Yep.
Is that an anemone behind it on the right-hand side?
Yeah, it is. Yep. Yep, that's an anemone. We collected one of those recently, too. I don't know if it was our last cruise, but recently.
Here's a question from David Glenzer from Wisconsin. Is there a starting date for the next season yet? No, I'm getting some head shakes over here. So I'm sure you can find that out.
Stay tuned.
On our
Sorry, Dan.
on our website, and if you follow us on social media, I'm sure we will have our next dive dates, our next season dates up and at 'em.
I mean, the season's not over yet. They're still mapping. They're still mapping to go on some other activities. Yeah.
To answer the question, chat, no, I don't believe it's the boobies that's causing our internet problems. So
Let's check really quick.
Yeah, there's some pretty strange effects with the effects of the sun on satellite transmissions in certain latitudes. You can have hours of the day where you're just completely blocked out of transmission. So, all of a sudden, satellite's fine, and all of a sudden you lose it for like an hour or two certain times of the day, depending on where your satellites are, which satellites you're using, what your stations are. So it's a very interesting science.
Mm-hmm. And that's where our IT guy Tim goes into panic.
I don't think we have any of those lately, but a couple years ago when I was out here on a different ship, we had these kind of like blackout hours.
Whoa.
Were you just like dead to the entire world, or just from satellite?
Just satellite. I mean,
Okay.
we still conducted the science like in the old-fashioned days.
Why don't you send carrier pigeons?
No, like handwritten notes on paper, notebooks, pens, pencils. Electricity still worked. It's not like we're had it. Yeah.
Here's a question: why do they call it precious coral?
Altitude 1-2, but delta is 2-0.
So, precious corals are a family of corals, I call them soft corals, but they're not true soft corals. A family of sea fans.
Yeah, roger.
In the family Coralliidae, and their skeleton is usually hard and solid, fairly dense.
Altitude's at 1-0.
And for that reason, when they were largely first encountered in the Eastern Mediterranean, at least some species, from the genus Corallium and species Rubrum, were often harvested and carved into gemstones, so hence the term precious coral.
Ooh, another sea cucumber?
But that was in antiquity, and then through time. I don't know. I believe that is still done in certain places. However, that family is also subject to CITES Appendix 2, I think, which means that they are. It is forbidden to to go between countries that are party to the CITES Convention with those materials in your possession, with those animals in your possession. That's the Convention on the International Trade of Endangered Species, I think.
ITERIEASS?
CITES.
CITES. Yeah.
CITES. Oh, okay. Answer the question in chat. Are the boobies red-footed or blue-footed? I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure our
Thought it was
expert-
red-footed.
Yeah, I'm sure Yvonne knows for certain, which he will be on the next watch. So if you'd like to ask that question again, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to answer it.
Some angular rocks right here.
Nice rocks.
I wonder, now it definitely looks consolidated.
Come again?
The rock does. So I wonder
Yeah, I
if
have tried
we
to
move
change it.
back
Had
into
some
the
control
carbonate,
looking west.
or,
I'll try and swing over
moved out of
if you want.
whatever we were in.
Yeah, with crust, right?
No, not as
Yeah.
bad. I haven't tried more than 10 degrees. Let's try it.
Kind of looks like the dip angle's different now,
I'm going to
too.
adjust to 230. Yeah, roger.
And another question, how far do boobies fly? Are they nesting on Johnston Island? or do they come from farther away? I know that at least some of the birds we actually had since we left port, and they'd just be kind of chilling with us.
Wait, really?
Yeah. I think they left about maybe 2-3 days ago, and they just I haven't seen them since.
There we go.
But I'm not
Came
entirely sure
across
how
after
far
I
they flew.
plunged.
Well, the boobies nest on Johnston. Several. It's a bird sanctuary. Johnston is, so several species. One's endemic, I think.
Really?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Again,
Don't quote me on that. There, we
Yvonne-
have a lot of information available.
Yvonne knows a lot more than us schmucks behind the screen.
Look at this color contrast between the left and right.
Yeah, something about maybe settlement settling on one of these surfaces versus the other, perhaps.
And
I don't know. This
Settling.
yeah, it could be carbonate.
Yeah, I don't.
It has that like a broken appearance.
so, Steve, what are these species on these rocks here?
Yeah, so we got on the right-hand side the same hemicorallium we've been looking at. And on the left is a sponge in the genus Tritopleura, glass sponge.
Oh my gosh, I spelled coryllium correctly. That's cool. Oh, wait, nope, no, I didn't. Okay, I take
Saw
it
that
back.
going.
Oh no, I did spell it right. Oh, cool. I'm learning.
Yeah, the dip's definitely changed.
More up here, yeah.
Here's a question for you, Steve. Are the red coral part of the same precious coral family?
That's right.
What other types of precious coral are there? How many subspecies
Uh,
are there?
225.
I'm not aware of any subspecies, but we have several different genera in the family. So,
Yeah.
hemicorallium. So this group underwent a revision recently, and
Rough direction.
several
Yeah. Roger that.
different genera were combined in some cases. But hemicorallium is by far the most common we have out here. But there's also the genus Corallium, which is a little different. They have a slightly different polyp morphology than hemicorallium. Hemicorallium has more barrel-shaped polyps with kind of striations in the body wall of the polyp, whereas corallium is more hemispherical polyps or mound-shaped polyps. And typically corallium is either deep red or entirely white, whereas hemicorallium is pink or shades of pink and white. That's a very, very generalized statement, but just from what I've seen in this area, that tends to hold true. But then you also have, I think it's far more shallower species, or genus rather, is Pleurocorallium. Pleurocorallium is thicker, generally, branches, and also has hemispherical polyps, or mound-shaped. But it's fairly distinctive. That one is often the most easy to confuse with Paragorgia or white Paragorgia, where we see it, or Cibogorgia sometimes. But when you touch them, it's very apparent because one will flex and the other will not. The precious corals are inflexible.
Then another question. Has anyone found a meteorite at the bottom of the ocean? People go looking for them on land. Do they ever go looking for them in the ocean? I believe they do. And I believe, Steve, was it you that was on the expedition that found the moon rock or space rock?
Well, we didn't find. There's a scientist at NASA who's working on this, but I don't know the results of that study. Apparently, what had happened with that instance is they found some shards that were suggestive. So what happens is usually a meteorite doesn't crash whole into the ocean. It usually will explode someplace in the atmosphere, and the debris field will be scattered over a wide area. And that may include large chunks, but it's more likely to include you know, small shards. And so my understanding is they had found some shards, and those were brought to NASA's Cosmic Dust Lab and are undergoing analysis. Can we take a look at that yellow stalk at the right side here? Just a half zoom, see if it's worth taking a closer zoom.
Is that a sauropathes?
Yeah, so what we have here, this looks like, I'm not sure. Looks like it could be yellow sauropathes, which I don't think we've seen on this dive so far. We've seen the red morph. But my understanding is that the yellow morph has been more widely collected. So I think we're just going to image that and then move on.
Picked a precarious spot.
Yeah.
And what's this thing called again, Steve?
Sauropathes.
Spell that for me.
Stauropathes.
Great. Going back to the chat.
All right.
On previous cruises, there was an abundance of basket star on every dive. I don't think we've seen one on this cruise yet. Is that correct?
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think we've seen one.
There's definitely some debris flow here.
From, yeah, carbonate, you know.
Yeah, maybe when it was an island, wave action caused it or something.
Super angular breaks, yeah.
And what type of flow is this? Again?
It's not.
Oh, I was like, wait,
I thought you were cracking a joke there.
Debris flow
Yeah.
is what I called it. It's not volcanic. Yeah, I wonder if that has to do with carbonate. Calcite breaks in cubes, so maybe it keeps some of that morphology. Limestone does.
Yeah, it's very. I really like the shape of the rock faces here.
Roger.
All broken, angular.
Yep. Okay.
Very, very
bad.
cubist.
Agreed.
You'd be a big fan of calcite then,
Yeah.
or halite, if you know what that is.
Or Minecraft.
Whatever it wasn't right.
Salt.
Did you all say that you think this isn't volcanic, or did I hear that wrong?
Yeah, I don't think it is.
Oh, okay.
Remember in
A nice looking bamboo.
Rob's geology presentation, there was these like neat looking chimneys of angular rocks, very square, rectangular looking.
Yeah, columnar basalt.
Right.
Yeah,
We
that
haven't
is
seen any of
a
that, have we?
very, very cool feature.
Yeah.
It sometimes can occur underwater. It's how basalt cools, but we're not sure how it works underwater, but on the surface, the way it cools is in those columns, in the hexagonal columns. It's very cool.
I'm getting really into this idea of artists at sea that specialize in cubist stylist painting. I think you could get some really interesting artwork out of the geology in this terrain.
Oh yeah.
I think it'd look very gray.
I think it'll rock.
Oh, God.
Started
You're
early
welcome.
today.
And here it goes. All right. It's only uphill from here, guys.
Minus 10 watch
No,
bucks.
no more, no
Whoa,
more watch
whoa, whoa,
bucks.
whoa, whoa.
No more watch bucks for you.
Oh, wow.
Only good puns here.
All right, all right. I'll try.
Kakui, did you have any watch bucks?
Not anymore.
She's in watch buck debt. You have to pay back with interest. Sorry.
Oh, no.
You just have to be positive, otherwise you can't take part in Final Jeopardy.
Ah, nice.
Atlanta's down to 220 at the moment.
Sounds like an insult. Cubist.
You
Cubist?
Cubist. Oh, I'm trying to think.
You're not a circleist, you're a cubist.
I'm trying to. I thought, then what does circleist mean?
Circle. What else?
You
could
mean
it
a spherist?
Yeah, I guess you're right. My
Yeah.
bad.
We are so avant-garde. We're making up names of.
I just trying to see like how is being a cubist a bad thing and how is being a spherist a good thing? What biases are being put in place here?
I have no idea.
Don't be 3D.
One point in time, two artists had that argument. No doubt about it.
Oh, yes.
Answering that question, chat, have we found many man-made wastes such as plastic in the deep ocean? Unfortunately, yes. The dives throughout, we've seen quite a few. And unfortunately, we even on our dive, we found a flip-flop, one flip-flop. But yes, it is not uncommon to see trash at this depth.
Did you know that the story of Hercules, he was recognized because he only had one shoe, one sandal? And he was trying to not be caught by his enemies.
I did not know that.
Really?
You waited until now to share this? That would have been so appropriate. With
I was trying to figure out like the namesake of Atalanta, and the next thing you know, I'm reading Greek mythology, and I'm looking at Hercules, and I said, wow, the king actually picked him out of the crowd because he had one sandal.
Huh.
No kidding.
The king had expected Hercules to kill him, so the king asked Hercules what he would do in his position, and Hercules told the king to send him on a mission to achieve the golden fleece.
The task of Hercules. So is that why we found only one flip-flop at the bottom of the ocean? Because Hercules lost it?
Probably. That was his other flip-flop.
Yep.
Gibson, did you figure out the Atalanta?
Can we,
I was reading about Atalanta.
take a
There's a little
look
less information.
Okay.
Where's my pointer?
She's
There's something
involved
spiky
with-
down here. Do you see that on the
Oh, yeah, I
downside
see
of
it.
the rock?
I'm guessing
I
crinoid.
gotta ask
What's that?
Allison about that. I've always wondered that.
Yeah, there was something on the downside of the rock right here. Yep.
Brandon, here's a question for you. Is limestone columnar jointing formed by the same columnar jointing on basalt rocks?
There's limestone columnar jointing?
That's what this person is asking.
I've never heard that. Let me look it up.
That's a
In the meantime, while you look that up, what kind of processes create these kind of rock formations, if not volcanic?
come down a little bit.
What would I call the process? It's basically crystallization of coral or some kind of reef. When this was an island, a reef built up, and as the volcanics subsided, the reef kept building, and eventually it lithified into what you're seeing now. I mean, then it got crusted over. But so sedimentary processes, I guess. Non-clastic. What is it? Chemical processes. Biochemical. There we go. I got
That's
there.
an urchin.
Nice.
Oh, it is an
That's
urchin.
Nice.
Bring on the lights.
That's a neat urchin.
What type of urchin do you think this is, Steve?
Oh, I don't know.
The urchin
Yeah.
kind.
I am not. No.
Liz.
No, this is a. So this is not a pancake urchin like we've been almost exclusively seeing. This is some other taxon. Just hold here a second. I want to actually see if we have this first before.
Yeah. Some people in the chat are saying that there is no columnar jointing in limestone. Columnar, yes, that.
I think it's a type of sideroid, but
Sideroid.
Double check first.
I don't know why limestone would ever do that anyway. It doesn't follow its habit, its crystal habit, but you never know.
And I love you, random citizen.
Sound like a space officer or something.
Isn't that from Megamind?
It is.
Nice.
It is, in fact, one of my favorite anime movies of all time.
Ah, I love that one too.
All right. I think we're good on this one. We'll stick with an image. Thank you.
So Dan, I was able to come around facing 135 right now, as long as it wasn't nose diving.
But I do believe it's might not be a siderite. It might be a different. Actually, no. I changed my mind. We're gonna collect.
Hey Dan, I think he wants to collect.
I finally found the image of it in the family that I didn't think it would be, and it's a possible question mark species that hasn't been identified from this area.
Ooh.
It's got
so
pepper higher
flakes
ground.
on
You
it.
wanna? Is the ship still moving?
I don't know if there's going to be an easy way to collect this.
Maybe the scoop in a bio box or something.
Lantern.
Okay.
Will it swim away?
Can these urchins
Possibly.
swim?
I mean, I think they can move.
I don't know. This guy looks pretty
I
stationary.
don't think they're completely sessile.
You want a craft arm?
Are we gonna have another shrimp scenario?
I think the other watch the other day would say otherwise.
What? Yes, that's right.
So this one's mostly like Canopedina, but there's a couple of different possible species it could be.
I like that species name.
Hawaiiensis. Yeah.
I like it too.
To answer that question in the chat,
Yeah, you can do that. Yep.
who deals
have
with
it
all these
here? I
fun-looking
forgot.
spines? It is our lovely, one of our lovely biologists on,
Okay.
Yep. All right.
on the ship, Liz. She is
Yeah.
responsible for
Yeah, either
dissecting
side.
and handling these kind of sea urchins.
Want me to
sea
make sure the
cucumbers,
jar is empty?
and other live
Yep.
samples we get.
Full.
There we go.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't look like Hawaiiensis. It has those black spots on the tube feet, which is more representative of this Canopedina species question mark.
That's full zoom.
So I think it's definitely a valuable collection for the biodiversity aspect.
I should call it Canopedina pepperin something.
It also has those black or darkened spine tips. If you notice, there's red.
Oh yeah.
Ah.
So are those spine tips, are they coated with a sort of like venom?
Intact as much as possible, yeah. Yeah, scoop might be the way to go.
Scoop is the schmoove.
This one doesn't have.
True. Yeah. Definitely different species.
Yeah, I mean, suction sampler could work. By intact, I mean like the center of it intact. If it loses a spine or two, it's not a huge deal. Yeah, I would be very surprised if it did with the spines. They're fairly rigid. They don't break easily.
And to answer the question, what is your favorite
Yeah,
part
either
of your job?
whatever you think is more easier or appropriate.
I'll answer that in just a second. Then really quickly, my favorite part of this job is probably reading all the chat and getting to interact with our people at home.
That's a crazy looking urchin. urchins are echinoderms, Steve?
That's right. Yep. So echinoderms have very, very diverse body plans, but essentially they're all variations on a theme. And that theme is tube feet and some sort of elongated or spherical body.
And do all have pentameral radial symmetry too, or just some?
I believe that is true. Yeah.
Where can you see that on this, on the urchin
Might
like
get a tether
this?
tug
Like a
soon here.
radial
Dan, want me to go
symmetry?
tail to tail?
Right.
Yeah. So if you look at it from the top down.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, I guess I could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll see it when we get it in the lab.